Hi, my name is Christian A. Pacheco, and today I'll be giving my speech about a journal article. The topic I chose to speak about has been given as a way to curb carbon emissions and help slow down the environmental global footprint that we have seen happen in the past time. Large fast food companies have tried to give in their own products about this topic, like McDonald's and Burger King. They're trying to get in on this move as well because of the demand in the market, with McDonald's having their McPlant burger and the Burger King having the plant-based Whopper. Now, what this topic is going to be about is plant-based meat sustainable. Now, I did research on this topic throughout the entire time, looking through other countries like China and those with large populations and what they have done to have alternative meat-based products. And what they have done is use things like insects because there's a lot less emissions coming from insects and you can get a lot more food per se through that way. However, after researching that and looking through it, I ultimately decided to go with plant-based products or plant-based meats about my topic because I felt, at least in America, it'd be easier to go through with than saying we should switch to bugs, at least right now. So I believe most Americans would see that as outlandish at most. Next, after I finally decided to ultimately go with the plant-based ones, I decided to do more research, look at different topics of about plant-based meats, look at different articles and so forth and so forth. I ultimately decided on this one because I felt it was straightforward, spoke about the points, gave counter arguments, and ultimately gave the exact things that I wanted for this. Now, the reason that I care about this article and care about this topic the same way I feel that everyone should feel, just like you, I live on Earth, and as I'm sure many of us have heard, that pretty soon there is going to be a global climate pandemic that is going to be irreversible and potentially could wipe out our species. So that alone is scary enough to care about a topic. The next thing is I'm not I'm not happy about switching from meat. I mean, I love meat. It's delicious. But if it's between saving the planet I live on and enjoying a delicious actual meat burger, I would choose saving the planet every time over. Now, the journal article that I'm going to be reviewing today is by Fauchet Atkinson, Are Plant-Based Meats Sustainable? Dated for fall 2020, published in AMAS Volume 2. Now, in this article, the first thing I'm going to be speaking about is the damages that the meat companies have affected to the globe and to the carbon emissions, as well as the switch that we're starting to see because of the drive and push that everyone is starting to hear about the climate problem. The next thing is going to be speaking about the meat problem and the belief of a director and how he sees things going. And the last thing I'm going to be speaking about is from a professor giving her counter argument on plant-based meats. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and move into my first main point: the damages that meat companies have produced to the global emissions. So, from research has shown that the meat companies have produced 8 billion tons of carbon CO2, which is equivalent to 1.6 billion cars every year through the meat products that they make and use. Now, the switch that we have seen from this is that they're starting to switch to an alternative meat like soy and protein. Now, using these ones consumes less resources like water, fossil fuels, and land, and in turn, it's healthier than meat. Like the Maple Leaf Food Company has spent $401 million into pea protein in the US. They are also not the only ones. There's other companies inside the US that are spending 1.6 billion into researching alternative meat products. Now let me go ahead and move on to my next main point, where we talk about the director that I mentioned earlier. Director Salvian Charlie Boyce, director of the Dalhousie University of Agriculture, Food and Lab. What he says here is that the demand for meat is never going to disappear, or at least the only reason it has slowed down is because of COVID. And once COVID goes away, the demand is going to skyrocket back up. Now, the reason he says this is because of the recent veganism that has been happening in Canada. About 600,000 Canadians have stated that they are now switching to an only plant-based diet. He says nonetheless that this will not change the fact that the meat demand will go up, and this is just a small factor into the whole problem. Now, into my last main point, Professor Abigail. In this article, she states that there is need to be talking about the sustainability versus production. Now, the reason she says this is because it's not the same thing as looking for the resources that is needed to produce the plant-based products. It's the fact that all the plant-based products that is produced by these companies is still an extremely small portion of what they make and what they produce. To say back, the Maple Leaf Foods. Only 4% of the 176 million that they made in the last year's revenue was from their plant-based products. However, now to caveat this, even though it was only that small portion that they put in or they were making from that time that they switched to a plant-based product, they cut their global footprint down to 50%. Now, the last main thing is industrial agriculture. Now, this part has effects on the globe and carbon emissions in many different areas. The first thing is that with farmers making their own stuff, they are not controlled by themselves. In the main part, it's controlled by large retail companies and large sellers of meats and such. So in turn, the farmers don't have any power into what they can make. The only thing they can do is listen to the demands of what these larger companies want and in turn produce that product. Now more so, because of the larger and ever growing farmer debt, a ton of farmers have been out of business, leaving in turn other farmers to buy up the land and then start using more harmful practices in order to control this larger land and control the product that needs to keep going out. Now let's go ahead and wrap everything up. In this speech, I spoke about the journal article by Fashit Atkinson, Are Plant-Based Meats Sustainable? Dated for fall 2020, published in AMAS Volume 2. The first thing I talked about was the damage that the meat companies had been giving to the ozone layer, like the 1.6 billion, I believe it was, and then the 1.62 billion equal to the cars. And then the next thing was a switch that they're making, like soy and pea protein. Then I spoke about the director who talked about the demands of meat and how it will never go down, even with the insurgence of veganism in Canada. And the last thing we spoke about was two separate parts with the professor Abigail and the sustainability of the production. And the last thing I would like to leave you is with a quote from the article. If you're somebody who is really concerned about sustainability, you need to dig deeper. Thank you for your time and listening to my speech, and I hope I was able to inform you more about plant-based meat products.